All right, so everybody, thanks so much for listening. We have a returning guest, and Phil's been on here. Well, this is the second time on, I should say, but he's doing a great job. If you want to find more about it's Philip Rossman-Reich. It's Locked On Magic. Definitely check it out. I watch on YouTube, but you can use Spotify and all the other podcasting sites. But again, Philip Rossman-Reich, we're grateful to have him on. We're going to talk some Magic basketball. The season ended. We're taping this earlier than it's probably going to be put up, but we'll say it ended a couple weeks ago. With that said, and we're going to talk some Magic basketball. So, Philip, thanks so much for coming on all the time. Greatly appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Just to go back, I believe before we spoke last, it was the Magic were on quite a winning streak. I believe they won 8 in a row at the time. Everybody had Magic fever in Orlando and even around the country. Then they went on a little bit of a break. They played the Lakers at home. It was a sellout at the Amway, which doesn't get sold out like it was at that game, and the crowd was really into it. The Magic came out flat. I know it was kind of between a break, that Christmas break, and then they kind of went mediocre. Had some 1 or 2 or 3 game winning streaks, but didn't really do well after that. Was that the time in the Magic season where you said, hey, we had that eight game winning streak, but everything kind of fell apart there, and this is not a team that's a playoff team fully yet?
I don't think I don't think I felt that way at the time. I mean, we talk about this team, and they won 22 games last year, and they're I think the second or third youngest team in the league. So we always knew there were going to be some growing pains, and I don't think we entered the season expecting them to be in the postseason conversation. Let's not even talk about the postseason. The postseason conversation didn't seem like a goal, and so I look at the season, and yes, there were the wild swings. They had a 9-game losing streak early in the season, and then they won six straight to answer that. Then they lost their next 3. But from that time until essentially March or late February, the Magic didn't win or lose more than 2 games in a row the entire season. They went an entire month going win-loss, 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 like just exchanging wins and losses. And, that obviously isn't where you want to be. You described them as mediocre, and that's exactly the right adjective to use for them. But by the same token, that's actually an improvement. That's actually a step up, I think, for this group to be able to tread water a little bit. Now, that obviously doesn't help you when you're starting a 5-20 hole and you're trying to make the postseason. And the Magic, we're certainly within striking distance of the postseason. And I do believe that your goals need to change as the season moves on, as you get to know your team better. And we could clearly see that this team had postseason capability and had the ability to make that run. And they lost some critical games that I think would have tipped momentum in their favor. But by the same token, I think this team deserves a lot of credit for the growth they showed. They proved that they could win consistently, at least kind of every other night type of deal. And that sets them up well for next year as they continue to try and learn and evolve.
Well, during that winning streak, they beat a lot of really good teams that had some winning records. And even throughout the season, even not during that winning streak, they beat a lot of really good teams with some good records throughout the year. So it's a team that is ready for prime time. Like you said, a lot of injuries. They did have that up and down swing. Young team, as you stated. Grade the team this year. Going on from Mosley, even if we want to go up to Weltman and that aspect of the GM. So we'll start up with the highest of the high with Weltman, and then going down to Mosley, to the rest of the guys on the squad.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeff Weltman did a pretty good job. I'd give him a pretty solid B. I think that he's been very willing to kind of let the team play itself out. He's not someone that gets super active in trade discussions. I know a lot of Magic fans, we talked a little bit in the offseason about maybe going after Donovan Mitchell and saying, let's really accelerate this thing. We got Paolo, we got Franz. We didn't really know what we had yet in either of them. But Donovan Mitchell would have really put this team into overdrive. And there was a huge debate among Magic fans. And I thought it was the right decision not to chase him. I didn't think the team was ready. But now I sit here at the end of the season and be like, okay, we're ready for that kind of a trade. This team has proven itself that they can handle that pressure a little bit, that they can handle that expectation. If, Donovan Mitchell's obviously not going to come up for a trade again, but if that player comes available, the Magic should probably pursue it. They're probably ready to take that star trade. And so, I think Weltman deserves some praise for his patience, but at the same time, there are also just clear holes on the roster that haven't been filled. And yeah, you can't plan for losing all three of your point guards in training camp or very early in the season. And that's a big reason why the Magic started off so slow. But there are just little things here and there. Trading Mo Bamba, I thought was the right move, but it left you very exposed at backup center, and that proved to be still a weak area, as the Magic couldn't figure out if Mo Wagner or Goga Bitadze should play that backup center role. And in reality, those two guys are probably third centers on really good teams. They're probably being asked to do a little bit too much. And so they're just these little holes where it's like, okay, the Magic need to shore up their depth. They need to get some more veterans who can kind of provide a consistent base and some stability for this team. And I think that's just the biggest thing that's missing right now is the Magic don't have that stability yet to kind of keep growing.
Well, I got to disagree a little bit with the Mo Wagner, talking point. I did see, throughout the games this year, he did play fairly well.
Oh, yeah, he played very well.
And I think that he's a guy that can come off the bench. He's not a starting guy, but he's a guy that can come off the bench and really spark a team because he has that energy. He's got that vibe when he comes out there where he's ready to kick some ASS, we'll just say.
And he will.
So I think that's a guy that the Magic, and I don't know. I think he's up for contract.
He's a free agent this summer.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that the Magic should keep. And I think that's a guy that you probably can keep with Franz still on the team. And those guys kind of, having that good, brotherly relationship that they want to stay together. You got to keep that guy there, a good bench player like a Cole Anthony, who really played phenomenal toward the end of the year. Not to bring him in the mix, but he did do extremely well at the end.
Yeah, and look, I'm not here to knock the job that Mo Wagner did or the job that Goga Bitadze did. They both played really well. They both did exactly what they were asked to do. But, I'm also kind of thinking big picture here. And this was a concern I had throughout the entire offseason as well. Wendell Carter has never played more than 60 games in a season. I think, he's a very good player. He had a very solid season, but I think at this point in his career, you need to plan for him to miss 60 games or miss 20 games at least every year. You need to just know that that's probably going to happen, whether it's some nagging injury, whether it's a game here or there, or whether it's a 5 to 6 game stretch. It feels like that's going to happen. And so I feel like if you're going to go forward with Wendell Carter as your starting center, and I think the Magic should at this point, at this juncture, you're going to need a very high level backup center who can give you a spot start when you need it. And, look, I think Mo Wagner had a great season. His offense really took a big step up. He really understands what he's good at. He's also the worst defensive center at the rim in the entire league, by the numbers at least. Among players who actually play a decent amount. He is not scaring anyone at the rim. The only thing that he really does well defensively is to take charges. And, that's a risky proposition. So, I again, it's not to say that Mo Wagner didn't have a great season, but there are just certain things that you have to plan for, I think, with this team. Jonathan Isaac's a great example. The Magic still seem to be really, and they should have some investment in him, but they seem to be really reliant on having Jonathan Isaac in the rotation and filling up those backup forward roles. That backup forward role right now, you can't count on Jonathan Isaac to be healthy. And so, the Magic turned to Chuma Okeke. They turned to Bol, and, Chuma was hurt a lot. Bol is essentially a rookie, was really inconsistent this season. It's hard. There are just these little holes within the roster. Yeah. And, look, that's what the teams at the bottom of the standings have. Their problem is they don't have depth, is they can't kind of take these punches. You look at the teams that finish at the bottom of the standings. Charlotte missed LaMelo Ball for a good chunk of the season. Damian Lillard was out for a good chunk of the season. The Pacers didn't make the playoffs because Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. The teams that end up at the bottom of the standings are typically there because they can't handle injuries, even brief ones, and they crater when that happens.
Well, Chuma was a bad draft pick by Weltman in that group. He never really turned out.
It's been rough for Chuma. I don't want to say it was a bad draft pick. I think the idea it was good. But injury, I mean, you can't. They drafted him knowing he was injured. They gave him a full year to recover. The pandemic, I don't think, helped him because he was just about to come back from the ACL when everything shut down. And then no player probably got hurt more by the coaching change than Chuma. And it's not that Jamal Mosley's a bad coach or hasn't developed him well. I think the idea that they had for how Chuma should play went against the things that he was doing really well under Steve Clifford. And then again, it's just hard to develop a rhythm when you're hurt, when you're constantly hurt. And so, it's not working out. I'll agree with you there. I have a hard time blaming calling a player a bust when it's just injuries, that kept him out.
With Chuma, obviously him with the injuries, Jonathan Isaac had some good plays in Lakeland with the games there, a little bit with the Magic throughout the years, but even this year, a little bit, but not much. My question is with these guys that are so injury prone, I know Wendell Carter Jr., I mean, the guy's fabulous when he's out there and healthy. You can't get rid of a guy like that. He is a diamond in the rough right now, and he can really be a hell of a player when healthy for the Magic. I think Isaac can too, but the question is, he's making big money. I mean, do you stick with somebody like him, or do you look in? You got a lot of cap space already. Do you get rid of this guy and use that money to keep building up this roster? I mean, because it's time's ticking, out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Magic have done a really good job positioning themselves and positioning their books to really do whatever they want to do. Jonathan Isaac, yes, he's making $17 million a year. He's got 2 years left on his deal. This year is only partially guaranteed. Next year is fully non-guaranteed. And so the point that I've tried to make to a lot of people is if you're trying to make that star trade, and the Magic, even without having to waive Jonathan Isaac, still have a ton of cap room. They can still do essentially whatever they want in free agency. If there's a free agent they want to go after, or if they want to kind of roll it over, they've got another year where they can play that game. The thing though is, and this is the point I always make to people, is you don't get players in free agency anymore. You don't get star players in free agency anymore. Stars are starting to dictate where they go while they're still under contract. And like, it's almost the Stars are essentially saying like, look, re-sign with your team, get the max amount you can with them. And then if something goes wrong in a year or two, you could just force your way out. That's kind of how the league works today. And so I think what's more important for the Magic is to have this salary slot filled. I always hate thinking of players as assets and as just like numbers in a book. Yeah. But Jonathan Isaac is $17 million. If the Magic need to make a trade for a big player, they combine him with another player. They hit that max number, or they hit that big salary number to go get their guy. And the team gets a potentially all defensive team player when he's healthy, but someone on a contract that they could easily write off and go back into the free agency pool if that's the direction they want to go. I think the big contract question for the Magic this offseason is whether they're going to give Cole Anthony an extension. And, Cole Anthony, I think, thinks he can be a starter in this league, and he has every reason to. Thinks he can be a starter in this league. He's probably going to want a contract, somewhere near $20 million a year. I don't know if the Magic are willing to pay that, but having a $20 million contract that you might be willing to trade that might be valuable to other teams, especially if the Magic can figure out a way to front load it like they've been front loading most of their contracts, that could be something valuable to help them bring in a star player or someone down the line. It's more about the salary slot and how much they're making as a potential asset than it is about, going out and clearing up cap room for trade or, not or letting a guy just simply walk. It's about preserving that kind of salary slot. And so, I think the Magic have been really patient with Jonathan Isaac. I think they've shown the league that they are willing to wait out on a guy that they believe in and, given him every opportunity. And I think that says something to the rest of the league as well. But at the same time, I think the Magic also know how valuable Isaac is as a $17 million trade chip if they want to use it. And so do the Magic trade Jonathan Isaac this summer? Probably not. His, the surgery that he had that ended his season was relatively minor. He's supposed to be back on the court fairly soon. But by the same token, I think he also has to prove himself before he gets value around the league again. And that's by playing, which he obviously hasn't done a lot of in the last few years.
Well, let's go back to the injury issue. And I think this just plagues the Magic regardless. Yes, they're pretty healthy now, but it's still plaguing. we talked about Carter, we talked about Isaac, we haven't talked about yet, I should say, Markel Fultz, who has been injured on and off during his Magic career. You get rid of, and I agree with you. I think Cole is looking for the money now. He's had a hell of a year for him. And my question is, do you get rid of somebody like that, like you said, with the trade piece, and then Fultz ever goes down with an injury, you're back to square one again. And it's just like kind of a vicious cycle with the Magic. And I hate to keep dwelling on the injury
No,
prone, but it's true with this team
it's
that they
it's
have a
the
lot of
biggest
guys. Go
it's
ahead.
the biggest thing holding them back. Like they started 5-20 because Markel Fultz broke his foot before training camp. Cole Anthony suffered an oblique injury 5 games in the season, and Jalen Suggs was dealing with a sprained ankle for the first quarter and a half of the season. It was, I don't know what that math is. But that was the season. The Magic put themselves in a deep hole. They would have been a play-in team if Markel Fultz had started the season healthy. Like that, like everyone I think acknowledges that. We saw how good Markel played toward the end of the season. And to Markel's credit, and I think this is really important to note, Markel Fultz, I think, played every single game until the Magic essentially pulled the plug on the season after he returned. So he missed those 20 games after fracturing his toe. There's a few stories out there about how that happened. The going one is that he stubbed his toe while chasing his son around the house. I think that was kind of the one that, I don't know if that's actually where it happened, but like Markel said he was feeling pain for a little bit while he was working out. Markel stayed pretty healthy. Like this was the most sustained healthy run of Fultz's career. And he looked good. He looked really comfortable. He looked confident. And so, there's all these guys have shown that if they're healthy, at least all the key guys, they've shown that if they're healthy, they can be really good players. And it's just, will they stay healthy enough? And I do think that the Magic need to be looking for ways to improve their team, looking for ways to get better. That includes adding more talent. And that includes thinking about, okay, which guys are going to be hurt, which guys can we rely on? And if some of these guys are constantly hurt, maybe we do need to move on from them and get someone with a little bit more of a solid history. I mean, history can only teach you so many things. Sometimes stuff happens in a game and there's nothing you can do about it. So injuries are random, but you got to plan for them as best you can.
Phil, are you putting as far as the Magic untouchable list? We'll go through this list, what I personally think, and maybe you can expand or you can agree or disagree. I think obviously you put Paolo and Franz on there, 1 and 2. And then after that, do you put Fultz too or no?
I don't know if I'd put him on the untouchable list. There's probably a tier just
but you
below
put those 2 guys for sure.
Yeah, Paolo and Franz are untouchable. If you're going to offer me a trade for Paolo and Franz, you better be giving me someone that is already an all NBA player and a perennial all-star, like someone that just his presence on my team means I'm a playoff team or means that I'm a championship level team. We're talking, obviously this doesn't happen, but like Embiid, Jokic, Tatum, Doncic, and Doncic is certainly an interesting thing that could pop up this offseason. But I think there's a tier just below that has Markel and Wendell Carter on it, where it's just like, these guys are really solid starters, in my opinion, but they might be guys that hold me back when I'm ready to compete for a championship. I think that, Markel Fultz has played really, really well, but his 3-point shooting is still a concern. It is hard to be a strong offensive team without shooters. And you need shooters around Paolo and Franz, and that's obviously the biggest weakness that the Magic have. Wendell Carter is, I think, a really solid player, but he is not the kind of rim protector, rim rolling center that seems to be really successful in this league. And so, I think what's interesting about the Magic's future is that we can clearly see the outlines of a playoff team here, but there's also clearly some areas where this team needs to improve. And some of the key guys that they might be relying on now, they aren't priorities to fix today, but they could be priorities to fix down the line as this team starts to contend at a higher level. And so certainly right now, I think the Magic are still in a phase where they can just kind of roll out what they have, see what happens. And certainly there are expectations now to make the playoffs, but they can see what happens and they can see how it all develops and how it all comes together. But I do think they also have to be thinking about, okay, what does this actually look like when we're competing for a championship? And if there's a way to get better at point guard or a way to get better at center, even though those guys should be really difficult to move or should be really that the team should be really reticent to move, if the right deal comes along, I'm not saying no. If something comes along that clearly makes me better, if you can upgrade those guys into true all-stars, you might have to really think about doing it.
So the Magic do have a lot of cap room for this summer. Obviously, they will be looking into free agency along with maybe trading some players. Regardless of what happens there's been a lot of people. I think you express this. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I know a lot of people that are Magic fans have been talking about if Cole Anthony does leave, you're going to be looking at Van Fleet, free agency. There's been a lot of talk of that throughout the year. Do you see that still? Do you agree with that?
I don't. I mean, I think I've been kind of hot and cold on the Van Fleet idea. A lot of Magic fans have discussed that throughout the season. I think he would give the Magic something they don't have and something that they do need. They need a guy that can just take a bunch of threes and make a bunch of threes. But
how is that going to play if you do? Sorry to interrupt, but if you do get Van Fleet, then obviously Markel's not going to be starting. I don't really see him going. Do you put him at the 2 or
I think about it. And look, Van Vliet is a tougher defender than he gets credit for. But I mean, again, I agree with that. I think if you're going to spend a lot of money, spending it on a smallish guard that's on the wrong side of 30, I think is a really tough sell. And that's a really heavy investment that I'm not sure I'm quite into for this team. The way I've described it is, I think that the Magic for the longest time have needed a guy who could come in, be a veteran, give the team a solid scoring base until the young guys are ready to take over. Well, that was kind of the need last year. This year, we know we have Paolo Banchero who could score consistently. We know we have Franz Wagner who could score consistently. The Magic don't necessarily need a ball dominant scorer. And to Van Vliet's credit, he could play off the ball really just as easily. He can play on the ball. He doesn't need the ball in his hands to get a lot of shots. He's an outlet as much as anything else too. So I do think that he fits in well, but just looking at what the Magic are doing and the way that they're talking, I get the sense that they're not going to make the splashiest moves this offseason. I think they're going to look to fill in their depth a little bit this offseason, whether that's through a trade, certainly that'll be on draft night. They'll work to do that. And I think they'll make a kind of medium-sized move to fill in some depth and kind of complete this roster, and then look to make trades down the road to really improve this team. I don't see them. I think at a certain juncture in the season, we all thought like, hey, go get that max guy, just give yourself that solid base to keep growing. But now that we're at the end of the season, I don't necessarily think that's the direction the Magic are gonna head.
So with the Magic free agents, who do you see staying and being let go?
So, the Magic don't have a lot of free agents. I do think that they pick up Gary Harris's option, which would like kind of constrict the Magic's free agent cap room a little bit. I think they keep Isaac, obviously. I think they keep Fultz. Wouldn't surprise me if they get an extension done with Fultz. Cole Anthony is extension eligible this summer as well. Would not surprise me if they take care of that as well. Beyond that, I think they keep one of Mo Wagner and Goga Bitadze. I'm not sure which one. I leaned again toward Mo just because he's the known commodity. They know him really well. They know what he brings to the table. So it wouldn't surprise me if they bring him back. It might come down to whether Mo is ready to be the third center. Because I do think the Magic will go out and find a center in free agency somewhere or in a trade somewhere. I know some Magic fans have talked about Naz Reid maybe being someone they chase after, or Thomas Bryant from the Nuggets now. As a guy that they chase after and spend a little money on. It would not surprise me if that's the direction the Magic do put their free agency money without any great centers in this draft coming up. And anyways, I think a veteran center works better at that spot for this team. It's hard to say beyond that. I think the Magic do kind of try and sit on their cap room and try and roll some of this over and add some key pieces around the perimeter, around the edges, to get themselves over the hump and into the playoffs next year. And then they can figure out, okay, what do we really need to take that next step?
So you're looking at a team next year as far as the Magic to be very similar to this past year's team then, correct?
Yeah, I am. Knowing how this front office operates, like I think there will be opportunities, but I get the sense this group wants to give kind of let this group grow holistically almost. Like they don't want to push the tempo. They don't want to kind of force them into something they're not ready for. They want this group to prove that they're playoff capable and playoff ready before they say, okay, what do we need to get from 8 seed to 4 seed? That's kind of what Cleveland did. Cleveland caught lightning in a bottle. They got the right draft pick at the right time. They made a couple really good trades to add to their core. They got to the play-in tournament. They lost there, and they said, okay, what do we need to get to that next level? And it was Donovan Mitchell. That's kind of where I think the Magic are. And look, they could view themselves as there. They certainly could push the tempo if the right opportunity comes along. I think Magic fans have certainly talked a little bit like, well, what if Damian Lillard becomes available? It's still about finding the right guy. Like I would say, the Magic should, if Washington finally makes Bradley Beal available, I think I think Lillard's the same way, but Lillard and Beal want to play for kind of ready-made championship teams. But Bradley Beal would fit really well on this roster. He wouldn't have to carry a huge load with Paolo and Franz around there, but he would give the Magic something that they desperately need in a three-point shooter. Yeah. You could go down the list of teams that could potentially trade some of their stars, and so much of this is going to develop as the playoffs develop. Which teams are going to break up? Which teams are going to say, we've gone as far as we can, we got to start over? The Magic have the assets to help teams start over. They have, at least one lottery pick. Depending on what happens in tonight's playing game with Chicago and Miami, they'll have a second lottery pick. They have some tools to help teams restart. And so I hate to kind of fudge it. And I know, I don't know when this will be released, so maybe the conditions will change, but they very easily could be a team that helps another team restart themselves and pushes some chips into the middle. I don't think the Magic are quite ready to make the all-in bet, though.
Just a quick question on, from myself. Do you believe that Bol will be back then?
I don't. I think he is someone that's probably on his way out. Look, yeah. Bol had a really nice season. Right. He proved, he needed to be healthy. He proved he could be healthy. He proved that he could contribute a little bit on the court. This was essentially his rookie year. But the Magic are going to add 2 more rookies. They're going to add some more players. Someone's got to get dropped. And I think the Magic gave Bol a lot of opportunities to kind of show what he could do. I think he showed he could be an NBA player, but his defensive awareness was just never at the right level that was needed for this team to be successful. He was just too hot or cold. And for a team that's trying to make the playoffs, that's asking a lot.
So with the Jordan Hawkins, obviously you're high on Jordan Hawkins. Do you feel like he could be that lottery pick, whether the Magic get the first or the second lottery pick? Obviously, we're not talking about 1 or 2 as far as the lottery, but they might get 2 picks. Are you saying that could be something for the Magic? Do you think the Magic might trade around with the lottery?
I think anything is possible. I think it'll be difficult for the Magic to trade up from their position just because the top 2-3 guys are pretty well set, and I think that I don't think anyone in that top 3 is going to move around a lot. But I also think that like the group that's from 4 to like 8 or 9 are really similar prospects, and I don't think I doubt that anyone's going to like fall in love with anyone so much. These are all, there are solid players. There are always solid players in the draft. But these are also players that are kind of deeply flawed in a lot of ways too. So I think that the Magic are a team that could move around. I think they're a team that could move out of the draft. I think they're a team that might be willing to move down in the draft to go get a guy that is undervalued. And Jordan Hawkins could very well be that guy. Before the draft process, he was in the 20s. Now I think after the NCAA tournament run, he seems like he's a pretty solid lottery guy. What I really like about him is the Magic need shooting. And he can shoot the ball. He can shoot the cover off the ball. He can shoot off the move. UConn runs a very NBA-like offense, so he should be very comfortable stepping onto an NBA floor. Is he going to be able to do much more than shoot? That I think that's why he's kind of where he is. He's obviously not rated as high as a guy like Grady Dick from Kansas. But between Grady Dick, Jordan Hawkins, and maybe Keontae George, the Magic probably need to make sure they get a shooter in this draft and find some shooting. That's the biggest thing that they need, some 3-point shooting. And so, I think if the Magic come out of this draft with either a veteran shooter or one of those 3 guys, I think they'll be pretty happy with how their draft shook out. And so, you got to start filling some needs. You got to start finding guys that can actually contribute to your team now that you're trying to make the playoffs. And every resource is important. And so you just got to be you got to be proactive a little bit, which hasn't always been Jeff Weltman's strong suit, but you got to be proactive a little bit and make things happen and make sure you get your guy, whether that's the veteran guy you want or the rookie that you want.
I think you really recapped it well, Phil, and I hope people do watch your show, Lock on Magic. Can you just give it a little bit of a tease of what's coming up within the summer months before, during the playoffs, the draft,
Yeah.
free agency, everything like that?
Yeah, right now we're still kind of in season recap mode on Locked On Magic. Just kind of going over the big takeaways from the season. We'll start some player evaluations. I'll start speaking more specifically about how individual players performed here in the coming weeks. We'll get into draft coverage very, very soon too. I usually like to wait until the lottery until I know exactly where the Magic are picking before I start looking at prospects and figuring out who exactly the Magic are going to go after. But we are going to get into all of that and get into that as the summer goes on. And obviously, we will be talking free agency. We talked a little bit about it here. The Magic, the Magic are an exciting team because they can do just about anything, and they're everyone can see how good they can play. So Locked On Magic is a great resource. Even listening to back episodes to get those hit counts up, but listening to back episodes to kind of get the full context of things. There's gonna be a lot of evergreen content here for a little while as we wait on the offseason to really begin.
All right. Again, Philip Rossman-Reich, Locked On Magic. Definitely check it out. YouTube, also on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I was going to say sold, but they're not sold. You usually either buy them or you don't, or you get them for free.
I mean, if you want to give me money to listen, I'm happy to take it.
Do you have a GoFundMe?
I do not. No, I do
not.
No.
Thing? All right. Well, we'll leave it there then. All right, Phil. Well, I always appreciate having you on, and I look forward to our next conversation. If you're listening to us on YouTube, again, share this interview, subscribe. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites on the radio, we thank you for listening too. If you're listening to us, definitely, again, subscribe to Locked On Magic, YouTube, or on your favorite podcasting sites. Phil, thanks so much for your time. Look forward to doing this again down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.